Hi, this is Lindsay Ambrose with Choosing Love.
And I'm Jackie, and we're sharing soulful conversations about integrating spirituality into our everyday life.
Today we're talking about addiction. Not just addiction, but what lies beneath it. We have a very special guest, Scott McDonnell, here today, and he's going to share his story with us. And we're going to just, get into it and learn about his life now and how spirituality has helped him make these different choices each day.
Yeah, we're also going to talk about not only is addiction with just drinking and drugs and stuff, it can lie in any way, anything that becomes obsessive, like obsessive thought. I need to do this. I need to have this. And today we're gonna hear Scott's story in how he his story, his recovery, his relapses, what works for him, what doesn't work for him, and what lies beneath it, like Lindsay said. So Scott, you want to introduce yourself? And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Scott McDonnell, and I am an alcoholic. And I do want to thank you guys for bringing me on the show. I think what you're doing is great. I'm glad you're building your channel, and I watched a few episodes, and it's really helpful. It's really what I'm doing, and it's amazing that when Jackie and I started talking, it was like exactly what I was working on in my life at that time. And I'm like, this is like God working, I don't want to sound all crazy, but it was like exactly like God working, that we were working on the same thing at the same time. And me being in need. It's not like I was an expert at this or still or am now. I'm not an expert now, but so it was very helpful, and the encouragement was great.
So I would like to hear is just what is I guess what I'm interested in though is, first of all, about where you're at right now. Like where have you been in the past 5 years, or like maybe 5 years, and then we could look back if we need to about what lied beneath it and what you've learned from where you've been. Does that make sense?
Certainly, yeah. Well, the last 5 years are probably the most exciting or the most challenging, either way to look at it. Certainly the most challenging, because I think the last 5 were the most difficult and the most harmful parts of my addiction. Just off the top of my head, I think in the last 5 years, I went through 3 treatment programs, multiple detox programs, but at least 3 full treatment programs, and AA, and obviously none of those successful, because I did relapse. I think the first one, let me think here. The first one, the longest recovery I've had is about 18 months of recovery, and I went out. Yes, so that would have been the first of the 3 around 2013 or something like that, 2016. So I've struggled in getting a grasp on solid sobriety. Like I would go out and I would drink and I would get sober. I actually just talked about this with my therapist. It's almost like I live, like I can relapse, pick myself up again, get sober. That part I can do, right? But when you start getting into this 30, 60, 90 days or a year, that's when the struggle starts kicking in. And for me specifically, around 90 days. And then it might be boredom. It's a lot of things we can probably get into whenever you want. But once you get there, it's like, okay, what am I going to do now? So I never give the actual full attempt at getting the life, the happy life. And so I'll be like, all right, well, I'll just relapse. And this is all subconscious. I'll just relapse. I'll find myself a new bottom. Then I'll go back to treatment. And then I'll, spend the next year getting on my feet again. And then I'll do it all over again, right? It's just complete insanity. It's just insanity.
It's as you say, like you said how this has been different this time because you've kind of found that connection to something bigger. Like you talk about kind of integrating finding God, and having like a higher purpose. So I wonder, like, it's so hard to kind of go through and I think as I hear in, whatever, it's a lot, what lies beneath is often sometimes it's like that story that we're telling ourselves, right? Or that conditioning, or that something that's inside of us. And for a while, we may not even be aware of it, right? Like of something that's telling you, but now it's like, you have that awareness and you're able to make a different choice, but you find that like now you have something, you found that connection, that deeper connection to something bigger than you. And I'm sure that the choice each day to, make that choice, make that better choice is not easy, but that's helping you? Do you think that's what's changed, or why you haven't relapsed this time?
Yeah, 100%. And that's the journey. And I think regardless if you're an addict or who you are, it's life's journeys to find what's greater than ourselves in life, to find some sort of meaning in life where we can become content that we've done our job on earth. Like if we spend 40 years in a job and raise 3 children and pass away and we took care of everything we needed to, I think we really missed the whole purpose of life. I think we're all really here to just find that God or find that power greater than ourselves. And then we can have the serenity as Alcoholics Anonymous talks about. And for me, it was a big journey. I mean, I'm from the south side of Chicago, as you guys are. Mm-hmm. And I was raised Roman Catholic, right? So I went to St. Cletus, and I was raised that way. And so I had a fundamental understanding of Catholicism and Christianity, but I wasn't like in depth in on it, right? And then I kind of just left the faith and left the God and just went on about my life and didn't worry about it much. And I didn't revisit it again. I mean, I took my philosophy classes in college. I took a lot of them, and I ended up conceptualizing a higher power of God of my understanding before I even started Alcoholics Anonymous. And then when you get into Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about find a God as we understand him. So we're able to conceptualize whatever God works for us. If it's the universal power of consciousness, or if it's the Buddha, or if it's Christ, it's whatever it is. And some people even, they're into Satanism, and that's their higher power. But so it's whatever it is. So I think where I ran into the problem though is like when I first started coming into AA, I would conceptualize my higher power as I understood him. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I got it wrong. You know what I mean? So like I had this thing where I'm like, oh, I know God, I know my God. But I wasn't connecting with him, and I wasn't able to hear him, and I wasn't able to be guided by him, because I was like, I'm looking left when I should have been looking right. I mean, like the Bible says, look within, right? And I never understood that, look within. I'd see a bird land and start talking to me, and I'd be like, oh, there he is, that's God, or any number of things, so that's what's actually changed now, is I think that I've actually made that connection and that understanding, and it's through the prayer and the meditation, because I was never able to meditate. So I found God within my meditations, and it's not what I expected my entire life, so that's a little background on finding my path that way.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about leaving the church, something that just came up, and I just want to say this, is that it's okay to have a healthy rebellion against the church. Like, I think it's really, really important for us to be okay with seeing what's really out there in learning, because I think we learn lessons in life, right? And people like to quote them as mistakes, but I call them lessons learned. Like, we learn lessons through times, and sometimes we have to fall down a billion times before we can pick up to actually hear things. But you have to have the life experiences for what you're meant to have. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I'm with you 100% on that. Falling down is exactly my story. I've done it 1,000 times. And I said, if nothing else, if I was to leave this earth, put on my tombstone that I never gave up.
Right.
I always, every time I fell down, I picked myself back up, and I still do it today. And I think everybody needs to do that. And I'm all about, failure is just one step closer to success. And, failing is, if you never failed, you've never tried, and, so I live by those kind of slogans.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I find is interesting when you're saying this, what's coming through for me is that I wonder if people actually think God or their higher self, their higher power, the divine. I wonder if at some point the reason why they don't turn back to God is if it's because people feel going in that direction makes them powerless. In all reality, it really does make you powerful. I don't know if it's because for me, I was Roman Catholic too. I went to St. Cletus as well. And the Catholic Church, for me, felt very judgmental. It felt very, it just felt like, shame, guilt, all that. Don't do this, don't do that. And I know there's an inner desire for myself to experience an adventure and also experience things in life in a way that was more vast instead of short. So I feel like I had to rebel. And I know that when it came to the time when the time was right for me, I made a commitment to God. I said, if this was going to happen, I promise you I'll never drink again.
Right.
And with that, I kept getting, and after that happened, I made that commitment happen. And since then, I've gotten gift after gift after gift.
Nice.
But it's not easy gifts, like learning lessons. Like it hasn't been like all smooth rolling, but whenever I needed some clarity or something to open up in my life, it opened.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I think that for me, it wasn't, well, first, what I'm getting out of this and what I think about it is that most people don't have a good opportunity to even think about God or to work on God. Like addicts, we have a lot of time on our hands and we lose a lot of jobs and we're broke and we don't have anything to do. So we actually have time to dedicate to stuff like this. So I think if you look at somebody like my father, he was a very busy man. He worked 70 hours a week. He raised his children. He hung out with his buddies. I mean, how much time can you put towards God in a situation like that? Whereas if you look at the monks in Tibet, they're doing 30-year vows of silence or something to find God. So they have a lot of time to dedicate. Mm-hmm. And in America, we're just so on demand. I mean, we're on our phones, we're on our televisions, we're on our computers, and we're not really thinking about God. I mean, mm-hmm. I can't speak for the whole society, but that's what I see. Mm-hmm. That's what I see. And that's what I did. I didn't reject the Christian faith. What happened, if you want to know, is I started dating this girl in college, and she was a Hindu, right? And at that time, I was Christian. And I am a Christian right now. Anyways, I went back to Christianity. It took a full circle. But so I'm dating this girl in college, and she's a Hindu, and she's like, do you believe in, she asked me if I believe that God took a rib out of Adam to make Eve. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, I thought for real that men had one less rib. Because we were taught that in St. Cletus that happened. I'm like, really? So I always believed that, And then I'm like, well, no, I don't think I believe that. And she's like, well, then you cannot call yourself a Christian if you don't believe everything that's in the Bible. And then I'm like, boom, all right, I'm not a Christian anymore. Let's go out on a date. What I mean? So that was my story.
Oh, nice.
I think what you said about that feeling of needing to the monk's path to kind of remove yourself from life is one path. But I think what we've talked about on this show is kind of the idea that life is the ups and downs, right? That's it. That's why we're here. I think we've maybe been led to believe, like sometimes culturally or, you know, what we watch, that it's all like rainbows and it goes like, it's supposed to be smooth. But I think having that understanding that that's how we grow, right? That the things are coming up to grow us in some way, and that life is this kind of up and down. And I think like what I find is just, and even, you know, whatever that, you know, I think we all kind of at different levels are, you know, addicted to different things, right? And maybe some are not as physical, but like maybe mentally, like, you know, the running a feeling in our head constantly of not being good enough, or, you know, not feeling like we're worthy for these things that are coming in our life. And so we're, you know, we're saying, you know, our head is saying no, and you know, and I've learned how powerful that is, you know, like when what we're saying in our head. And but I think for me, I've been really trying to like the idea of not closing, right? So like being open, and I was just curious, like how that's been for you, and like I could imagine, like sometimes it's, you know, the act of like what we did doesn't hurt us as much as kind of like our shame, like that voice in our head of, and I can imagine like that would be really strong, right? Like the way you punish yourself after you do something.
Absolutely.
I was just wondering
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
how you kind of, how you're able to kind of bring awareness to maybe that, and maybe like, you know, when that voice comes in and like you're being, you know, challenged, like what helps you kind of move through. And
Yeah, and that's a tough one. I struggled for a long time, and I still do, with guilt and shame. That, you know, I'm not the best father. You know, even though I'm not the worst father, I'm not the best, you know, boyfriend, or, you know, just things that I've done wrong in my life. But now I feel like, well, you said a few different things that need to be covered. But as far as dealing with the past, you know, I'm not a perfect person. And that's what, you know, the addicts need to really understand. And, you know, and I've done things that were wrong when I'm sober, you know, stone sober. I do something that, you know, it's regrettable. And then I'm like, oh, I can't blame the alcohol. But I think the first thing is, the leading addiction specialist, his name is Gabor Mate, and he's a trauma addiction specialist. So he deals with people like that. But he says what the first thing, and it stuck with me, that addicts should do is to show compassion for the addict yourself. You know, give ourselves a little bit of compassion for not being, you know, the perfect person, or just for being an imperfect person. You know, and then you mentioned the struggles of, you know, the highs and the lows. And I did just write a paper on this, or an essay, and it talked about, you know, we have good and bad, and we have high and low. And to me, that's balance. And balance always looked at me like, I always looked at balance, or when I was looking for balance, I felt like I'm not going to have any good or bad. I'm just going to be balanced, you know. But now, today, things look like, you know, I have a bad day and I have a good day tomorrow, and that's balance. Or I had a bad week and I had a good week. That's balance, you know. And I always, like, I don't know how you say this. I always brushed off that saying where they say, we got to have the bad to recognize the good. And that's so true. You know, I talk a lot about playing poker, and, you know, 80% of the times I'm losing in poker, 20% of the times you're winning. And that's a good ratio for what I do. But I still have that agony of losing 80% of the time. That means, you know, that's a lot. But then just recently, and I'll tell you one more story about poker, but just recently, you know, when I'm winning, I'm like, this is great. I'm going to enjoy this now. I'm not going to just go through a good time and not recognize it, because there's so few and far between these good times in life that I am actually going to acknowledge and enjoy the fact that I'm having a good moment. And I think I forgot my other thought, but it was along the lines of, yeah, I did lose it. I lost the second thought.
Well, I think it goes back to also like what you talked earlier about, like how, you know, sometimes we've lost the good memories from growing up. And I think it's really what I think is so great is that you mentioned about I'm going to remember the good times too. Like even if it's the 20%, if you can take your energy and focus on what is good and make that bigger than what brought you into like any kind of addiction, focus on more of like your steps to be proud of, even just like a baby, like remember your children, like when they were born and they didn't have any movements in their hands or feet, but once they were able to hold a bottle, like those steps, like, okay, this is the first time they get to hold a bottle for the first time. Then the next step is they get to crawl, they get to step. So just thinking about every process as we're in an infancy stage and we're okay with it, but we're just learning how to walk through life. We're just trying to get there. And if we can instead of comparing and judging against other people, just saying, this is where I'm at right now. I'm having a shitty day. Excuse me for my language. I'm having a bad day and I feel it here. I feel it here. I'm sitting with this emotion and feeling and just really learning about yourself for the first time, about this emotion that's in your body or your experience. And I do recognize that when you're in it, it's hard, especially when you haven't had that experience. But the question is what need didn't you get? What was that need that you didn't get that keeps looping back to for people, for addicts, like why do they have to keep going back? What is the reward with it? Why are you getting a reward for something that has so much control over your life? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I can answer that. Well, first to answer your second question, the reward is that we no longer have to feel, at least for me. I was so miserable and I was so hurt and I was in so much pain. And a lot of it, Lindsay, was that pain of regret and guilt and shame. I didn't want to remember the pain that I caused others. I didn't want to remember or feel the pain that I'm having from your first question for me. And I think every addict doesn't even realize this the first few go-arounds, the why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I can tell you for like me, I was given up as a baby for adoption, and for that, it's a very traumatic experience for a child, and I didn't even recognize that, even though my behavior, like I started drinking in third grade, by seventh grade, we were daily drinkers. And by freshman year of high school, we were daily cocaine users. But we thought that was normal. I didn't really recognize, one of my therapists called it the void within ourselves, and that we need to embrace that void. But some people don't even know that void is there. Like some people, may have been molested as a child or even just witnessed their parents fighting or, traumatic events. There's things that are believed now that like even in utero, however you say that, if the mother and say her spouse are fighting, the baby can feel that, even the trauma of just the baby being born. But for me, it was this adoption and the separation of my mother and myself. And I never recognized that until probably maybe as late as till my children were born, or shortly before that. So somewhere in my late 20s, early 30s, I started recognizing these emotions and these actions and why am I doing it? And then and I would kill these pains. And then I felt like, I'm not deserving of these things, So I had to go through and heal that. And that's another thing that's different this time around is, I did go out and I did find my biological father and I found my biological mother, so I closed those doors. And I also have something like 7 or 8 brothers and sisters now, and so now those questions are answered for me, thankfully, so I don't have that going on.
Yeah, I think those first 5 years of life, there's so much like wiring that's happening, that you're feeling, and don't you find that it's through the meditation, like through the being in the stillness, that you can kind of begin to tune in maybe to those feelings that have been pushed down for so long? And like you said, like when you're surrounded by people and everyone's just kind of getting into that more of that numbing void, like, so you're not feeling it, you may just, find yourself getting further and further from like connecting to the root of it, that, where that hurt is. But I think for people who would love to help someone who's in the position that you were in, I mean, was there anything that you could, another person could do when someone that they love or someone that, that they really care for is going through what you were going through? Is there anything, like, I was just thinking about that, like, with someone who's listening, or is there anything that someone can help with that?
Well, we're going to visit that, but you actually asked me 3 questions right there. So I'm going to take one at a time.
We're so excited.
And I actually think I lost the first question, so I'll go to the second one. As far as interpreting emotions, right? And that's the biggest thing, because I was taught, people tried to teach me through early stages of recovery and therapy, emotional intelligence. And there's this book out there called Emotional Intelligence. And I was not connected to my emotions. I didn't have any intelligence about my emotions. And that, which you mentioned, has come up through meditation, because I was so naive about emotions that I might have, say, an emotion that I say is anxiety, but which is actually God talking to me. I might have something that feels disturbing, but that's actually love, so it's through meditation that I can now find not a definition, but I can now define what my emotions are to myself, which is huge. That's the whole thing. It's like, because when I talked earlier about how my definition of God changed and the way that God worked, I wanted God to work the way that I wanted God to work, because the Alcoholics Anonymous said God as we understood him. But that's really not a really good message, because, I understand that my God is going to give me the winning lottery tickets, and winning lottery numbers. And if he doesn't, then certainly, I'm doing something wrong in my life, or he just doesn't like me.
Right.
So I think that people have to be careful when they go with the God of their understanding. But I find out that, the God that I'm using now, is way more intricate than that. And you ladies can relate when we start talking about energy chakras, and we start talking about meditation and communication through these channels, and I'm not like an expert on these at all, but I've recognized that, these power sources, which are the chakras within our body, are the way that I communicate with the spiritual universe, and they can come into me, and each chakra defines a different form of communication or message that's being sent to me. And it's just nothing that I expected whatsoever on my journey for it to come to this. And that's where my success is coming from now. Now, the third question was, can anybody do anything to help their loved ones? And unfortunately, my typical answer to this is no. Until the addict has had enough, until we're willing to help ourselves, until we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, we're the only ones that can save ourselves. I mean, my mother tried to save me her entire life, or at least my entire life. My family tried to save me my entire life. They tried tough love. They tried, and that's probably the only one that I would agree with, actually, is tough love. Kick them out on their ass, because, if my parents would have kicked me out on my ass when I was 20, I would have figured out how to provide and live for myself. But instead, they strung me out until I was, in my 40s, and then they passed away. And now I'm like, all right, can't pick up that phone anymore. It's me and God. And, so I really don't believe in enabling. And I always thought about it like, if my kids, not that I have a lot of money to give them at all, but like if they were adults or when they turn to adults and if they're going to be calling me for money, I'm going to be like, you need to get a job, you know, and that'll hurt me because I know it's so much easier. Just, you don't want to see your kids suffer, you know? But the enabling, I would say if anybody can do anything, is just stop enabling people, you know, because it's called learned helplessness.
Yeah.
You know, and I was at a point where I was like, you know what? I make less money when I work. When I'm not working, everybody is helping me, you know, and I have my bills paid and I have plenty of money. But as soon as I'm working, I'm like struggling. And it's like, that's called learned helplessness. You would rather, right? So I think I got all three there.
So go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I have a few things I want to state and just a couple questions. So when I was listening to your story about what you went through, and I wanted to name a couple things that you know I was tracking a little bit. And the first thing a couple of things that you mentioned, and I'm really glad that you mentioned, was the first thing, your healthy bond when you were first born was not formed. Like just like what Lindsay said, from 0 to 4, 0 to 5, how important those years are. And when a child, I believe, and I'm not an expert when it comes to adoption, but to have that bond kind of not understood, or it happened, even though your parents were there to love you because they chose you, like they're like, we want this child, you know. But I think that initial bond wasn't formed. And what you also said is that I started drinking when I was 3. So the modeling for you when you were 3 was that when you were 3 was like, drinking is what we do. This brings me to the bonding, the ties of the family. And so I'm going to go back to what I always have said, is that when people are 18, they're told to leave the house. And I understand your concept about learning helpless, or what was it? Learned
helplessness.
Yeah.
Learned helplessness.
Yeah. What I have a hard time with is that when we're 18, people are told that they have to leave the house, right? If they're not emotionally intelligent, they're always going to be going back to the family bond. So we as parents have to teach our children how to be prepared for the big world. And they don't teach all the worldly stuff in school, like the hard math stuff. So I think sometimes, not that I'm saying kids stay in the house, but sometimes, like even with you, like you just said, at 40 years old, because your parents passed away, you had to start taking care of yourself. And what I think happened is that you started becoming emotionally mature, even though you had children or whatnot. So it's like you had to come into center, you had to come to yourself. But if we're not taught how to come to our center at an early age, we're always going to be looking for that. Does that make sense?
I think that's great. No, I think you said it very well. Absolutely.
Yeah. I hear that too, Jackie, but I also think too, like that's innate, like that's who we are, right? Our center is that love. And so like I don't know that we can learn it from somebody else. I almost feel like you have, like, kind of like what Scott was saying, like, you know, I think about my biggest lessons. It's like when I screwed up, I learned big time, right? But like when someone tells me I'm not going to learn that way, it's like you almost have to like go out there and learn those things by yourself. And as a parent, you kind of have to. I always love the idea of like, we're here to give our children roots and wings.
Right.
You know, so we're going to give them those roots to, like, you know, make those good choices. But it's a tricky thing as a parent. But I'm hearing Scott, it wasn't until that, you know, they kind of said, you know, you're on your own, that's when, like, okay, I'm going to make different choices because I have to.
I guess I'm looking at more like of kids with trauma, like they never were able to have a tantrum.
Exactly.
Or
let me step in on this one, because I think you're about to say what I was going to say, or I'm about to say what you were going to say. I think it is innate for normal people, right? But it's not innate for somebody who lost their mother and never had it. Okay. And I'm not using that as an excuse, but I was basically lost. And then when you continue, like, my parents never let me fall down. That's another big one. It's like they're right there to pick you up and make it better any way that they know how, as a child or as an adult. They don't want to see their kid fall. And so that's another one. And I think those were the 2 points that I wanted to add to what you said, Lindsay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just want to make note right now, if there are listeners out there, we would love some live comments right now just to help us through what you're feeling right now in this moment with this conversation, as I feel like this is really talking about what lies beneath it. We're just going to touch on it right now. And we're touching on it. So if you guys have any live comments, we definitely would love to hear them, because it's not just us three having this conversation. The community out there, we want to be into this conversation because we want to help as many people as we possibly can in what they're needing or what they're not getting. So they don't have to, so they know it's safe to feel the pain, and it's okay to feel the pain. It's okay to feel to the depths of it, and that you're being held. So I just wanted to say that. Is there something?
That's nice of you.
What?
I said, that's nice of you. And when you were saying that, I was thinking about my children, and I think they're watching. They said they were going to watch. And hi, girls. I got a daughter named Carly, a daughter Andy, and a daughter Danny. So I have 3 daughters.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm scared to death. I'm just terrified, as horrible as this world is, to have them go off in it and have to learn these lessons that we're talking about. And I have the feeling like I don't want them to fall. I want to be there to pick them up. But at the same point, I don't, like, they were actually kind of born I was born with this sense of fear. And it might be from the adoption, but like, I wouldn't jump off a high dive. I wouldn't just take a skateboard down a big old ramp. I'm like, oh no, I'm kind of scared to do that. And they were kind of the same way. But I tried not to instill that fear on them. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd see my one daughter, Andy, she'd be running, and she ran kind of a little funny, nothing wrong with her. And I'm like, oh my God, she's just going to bite it. I mean, she's just going to wipe out. But I didn't want to tell her not to do it. I just wanted, because I didn't want to scare her. I said, run. And yeah, she bit it a couple times. But, I didn't want to give them that fear. Right. And I remember even those little twirly slides, those whatever slides you go down. Mm-hmm. My one daughter, she was like we I don't know how you say it, but the tension raised where it was like a deciding moment to go down this slide, and she wouldn't go down the slide, because we were. And then my second daughter, I just threw her down the slide the first time, so she didn't have anything to think about and. To build that fear with inside her. So I think that you just got to instill that in kids.
Love it.
Yeah. I love something I had heard you say before. It's kind of like the idea that if not now, then when? Or I think you had posted, if not me, then who?
Right. Yeah, I did that.
I've always thought about that, and I think it's such a great thought. Kind of the idea, like, we always feel like we have so much time, or we always feel like we have, like there's always tomorrow. Like the idea of like, tomorrow is like the worst, kind of thing we all say, because it's like, I can wait on that. I can wait on that. And I was just wondering, was that something like that kind of perspective shift, or the awareness, like, was that something that helped you move through, or the idea of that?
Well, as far as the tomorrow thing, today versus tomorrow, I've always been a today guy, regardless if I'm using or not. I have today, and today's the day. I was taught in treatment that when we think about yesterday, it brings guilt, and when we think about tomorrow, it brings anxiety, right? And this is another thing that I guess we didn't touch on. It's really about being in the present moment, and this is now, and this is today, and we don't worry about tomorrow. We don't worry about yesterday. We just make the next right decision in front of us, and that, as a poker player, that's what I got to do, right? I can't worry about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. I get dealt 2 cards, and I need to look at those 2 cards, and I need to play accordingly. That's why I love professional athletes so much. Like, you look at a game like baseball, the guy gets up to the plate, right? Or any athlete. And, you know, yeah, his wife's mad at him. Yeah, he's probably not that great of a father, has made mistakes. Yeah, he's probably in debt. You know, he's got all these problems going on. But he's got one job to do at that moment, and it's to hit that ball out of the field and get on base, right? So he's got as much pressure, if not more pressure, than everybody has. But they're able to just get in that moment, concentrate on that next pitch, and on the job they have to do in that moment. And that's what I'm really trying to work on. And I'm doing a really good job of it now. And so many times, I was thinking about it. So let me tell you, I don't know, this might take a minute, but I'll tell you a really quick story because I brought it up. But I was in Little League, right? And I was like the small kid, and I'm still a small kid, but and it was so horrible. I was not a good player, and they had like this rule that everybody has to bat, right? And I think I was like 0 for 20 this season, right? And so it ends up that we're about to win our first game, and the bases are loaded, and we need 1 run, and we'll win the game. And guess who's up? Me. And I was so panic stricken. I'm like, Jesus, I just cannot. So I go up there, and they throw me the pitch, right? And I just crack the thing. Like, I just smack it, and the bat breaks in half, right? And like, boom, somebody catches it, right? I'm out, right? And I was so distraught, you know? I was just like, oh, you know, crying as a little like 4-year-old or 5-year-old, you know? And I think that's always followed me through my life. That's what these traumas kind of do, is like, I expect the worst to happen. The worst possible outcome is always going to happen. That's always going to be there. And that's just the way my life is, right? But that's totally untrue, right? I mean, but when we're built in with that kind of belief system, which most addicts are, that's what we believe. You know, I believe that. I'm like, God must be punishing me, or I'm being punished for whatever I did in my last life, or something's going on, because nothing ever works out for me. And whether I choose to believe that or not believe it, you know, it has an effect on the present moment. Go ahead, Jackie.
Well, I was just wondering, have you ever revisited that age and that perspective and that time, and really given yourself that moment to hold space for the little boy in you that didn't get the home run that it wanted? I think you could change the perspective, the belief system, change the old belief system to get the new belief system in place. That you should have gotten you did awesome. You hit the ball.
I did. I was thinking about it today. I made contact. I thought about it today. I made contact with this ball. Yeah. I smacked the hell out of it. I was probably a whole 45 pounds or something, you know, and you know, and it just didn't fall the right way, you know.
Yeah, and it happens, and it teaches us a lesson about things aren't perfect. Things aren't perfect, but you know, we got, just like you said, the 20% of the time, we got to look at that 20% of the time, right? That when things are good. And so I think with trauma, there's like, trauma itself keeps you locked in certain parts of your life where the emotional intelligence, the maturity stops there, until we can go back most of the time and revisit those times and give that little child inside of you what you truly want. And that's, you know, I don't know if that's, I'm not a professional therapist or anything like that. I'm an intuitive healer. And from my experience with trauma, that is a really beneficial place to be. And there's forgiveness there for yourself as the adult you to carry that belief system throughout your life, and having compassion and empathy for yourself, you know, for yourself, for like, we're all just learning. We're just learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. By the way, I call you the white Oprah. I call you the white Oprah.
Oh, that's great. I wanted to bring up something else. We have a little bit of time. Lindsay, is it okay if I wanted to bring up one more thing? I love this. I'm just going to bring it up. We don't have to talk about it, but this is something you put on Facebook, and really love this. I love your stories and your articles, but this is from the Bible, Hebrew 12:1. Therefore,
Oh yeah.
since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially that sin that so easily trips us up, and lets us run with endurance the race God has set before us. When you posted that, I'm just curious, what was coming up for you for that? Like what came up for you on that?
Okay. Give me a minute, because I was watching a movie and that was quoted in the beginning of the movie. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of what the movie was now.
But what did it do for you when you, I know when you post something on Facebook, it has so much meaning and depth to it.
Right.
I know it.
Well, I was thinking about it today, as a matter of fact, and I'm going to bring it up because I really have to read it. But I was thinking about it today that it really needed to be stripped down to the first sentence and the third sentence. And so I have to actually bring it up to look and see what it says.
Because what I interpret from it, what I loved about it is, let us strip off every weight that slows us down. And what I see is all this burden and energy that we put upon ourselves in order that we think that keeps us safe. But it really, if we just remove that energy, like remove all those layers and just get straight to the light, to your purpose, to who you are, your truth. Lindsay, what do you think about
me was the race, the endurance of the race, that we're in a race. Get rid of that weight, which is, really the baggage of the past, the trauma, the regret, the guilt, the shame, whatever we're carrying with us, the failures of the past relationships, the professional failures, just all that weight that I've been carrying for forever. Just get rid of it. Give yourself a clean slate and run that race with endurance in God's name. And the witnesses who watch you do it, that's why.
I love
Be strong for that.
I love it. Lindsay, do you have any thoughts around that?
I think, I think that's really powerful. I think sometimes that weight, I've been thinking more about the idea of like when we have our personal preferences, right? Kind of like you have this, it's like you always have to find this balance of like keeping your eye on like what your goals are, your vision, but also being really open to, how things are showing up in your life and embracing that. I just think of so many times, like sometimes the weight is like what we thought it was going to look like, or what we feel like it should look like, or what we think, this is how it should be. And it's like, sometimes to me that the weight that is held is just like those thoughts in the head, the story of not, I'm not good enough. Yeah, I don't know. So I do love that. And I do think it's the idea of just being open to and not closing, right? And like being okay with what's coming up and just being in the moment with it. And it's not always easy. But I think, like you said earlier, as you take a little time to connect in, as you begin to like be still, take the time in meditation, you begin to get more awareness as to what is coming up that's not serving you. And you can recognize, okay, that's a story from the past that is not happening right now, except for in my own head. Really strong. And something else I think you had quoted, or that I think about is, and I've thought about this before too, that there's kind of like this invisible thread, right? This line that's through all of us and through everyone, and it's kind of moving you along. And as you can kind of take the time in the stillness, just be that, it kind of naturally moves you along. And as you kind of get in that flow, it's amazing, right? When things start coming into your life that need to happen, and like you're actually there for it, and you can say yes.
I love that. I love it. That I do have to add to that, because It is like, that's my teaching. It is that pillar of light that's inside of you. And our only job is to always clean it up. Anything that stops us in the way of wherever we know where we want to get to intuitively. We all know, just like you said, we're innately, we know what we want. It's just the human experience that layers on top of it. If you can just take those one steps moving forward, I feel, and just do something to clean up that line inside of you. Like, what doesn't feel good to me? Like, what isn't, like, if I'm angry right now, why am I angry? Why am I being triggered, right? Where is this rage coming from? Is it an unprocessed emotion? And your job is only to clean this up, like knowing what feels right and what feels wrong to you, your individuality, to your own soul, to your own spirit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, you guys are rolling now. Keep it going.
Yeah. Well, this is the stuff we really love. Sometimes we had to peel back the onions, but I really feel, and and this is one of the questions I asked to you, Scott, is because I have been sober for 23 years of my life. But I only went through the program for about maybe a month or 2 months. I was in a community where there was a lot of rich women, and they kept looking at me, looking down at me, like, you don't know, you're only 21. Like, you don't even have an idea. And so, but I realized where I wanted to go. Like, I took that experience and said, you're right. I see myself in you. I see the mirror. I see myself in you. And no, I don't want to be driving around my kids and drinking and driving. And I thanked them. And I said, thank you so much. And I may sound like I was comparing them, but they were modeling for me what I could feel it in my system. They modeled that for me. I felt that feeling inside my system that I don't want that. I don't want that ever to happen to me again. And with that, I was losing friends left and right. And I said, I love life. I want to live there. I know there's a purpose for me. I know there's a purpose for me. And so my journey on that whole entire path of my life is, I just want to clean up. Like, I want to see who I am. And it's hard and it's confusing, but it's so important to me to look inside and get that quiet. And we're talking about a person that has 13 kids, grew up with 13 kids. So finding quiet in the was really not easy. And you came from a family too. So I think I'm rambling here, but basically this inner knowingness is there, and just finding a way to move it out of the way. Because the more we clean up inside of ourselves, Scott, like you have recognized with your journaling, with your writing, with being clear with the alcohol, like where does your misdirected energy goes to? Starting to reflect in yourself, cleaning this up, because you have seen the power that it is of what guidance you can get. You get this peace and alignment, right? Where you're like, you're writing something and you're done with it and you're like, holy God, wait, I wrote that? Wait, I wrote that? Like, oh my God, I wrote that. So that's just my way.
It's amazing. 100%. You said it really well. And that's the great thing, is that this power is available to anyone.
Right.
It's not like we're special, that we're the people that can have this power. And that's the thing. It's when they say in the rooms, and I hate most of the things they say in the room, but they say, don't leave till the miracle happens. All right. So it took me, 22 relapses, 5 treatment centers, I don't know how many arrests, to finally get an understanding and a real use of a power greater than myself, but I think that makes mine, for me, genuine, versus like some people, I hear it all the time in rooms, that they're like, well, that they, I don't want to judge other people's experiences, but you can tell the difference. Right. And I'm excited. And now, since I've had a taste of that power, I'm excited that where it can go, because I'm just getting started. That's the beautiful thing. And, the progress that I've seen in myself just in a couple months here is amazing for me. And, I think if I just continue to focus and to meditate and to pray and to working with others and I do have to thank all my friends, they have been so encouraging. And that's why I use Facebook so much. All my friends on Facebook have been so encouraging to me and helpful. And, I feel an accountability to them, so, and sometimes that's what the addicts need. They call it accountability. That's why they have a sponsor or a home group, but they've just, you guys and everybody else have been really helpful in my journey.
Well, you are a gift, and it's great because, like, even in this moment, Scott, energetically, I can just see, even though I knew you when I was younger, but now I can see how you are open. Like the love that you have that's building inside of yourself is really amazing. Like that, I'm touched by that because I can see how you're making sense of it all, and it's helping you to love yourself more. And I'm so blessed to see that. So,
that's very nice of you, Jackie.
Yeah, well,
that's very nice of you, and you've been great. Thank you.
It's what I see. It's just what I see. Like, instead of being contracted, I see it opening, and it's like, what else is for me out there? I can be in alignment with something. Like it's so much more, and that's what I find so beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Isn't that just awesome? I mean, it really is.
So you don't
not just for me, but I'm saying I'm always like, God used me as a testament, to others.
Mm-hmm.
And they always told me, you can't give a testament until you go through the test. So I've spent my life going through this test, and I believe I'm still going through it. That's why it's the scary part with these addictions, is because any day, one bad day, I see it all the time, and it's happened to me. I could have a year sober, and I'll think, I'm just going to have a drink, or I'm done with it, and then it's all gone. It's just so scary.
So what could be helpful in that? Oh, sorry, Lindsay. Like having someone have an anchor, like what is it? What can pull them away from going for that next drink? What if you had a picture or an image or something? So what would you choose? What would you rather choose?
Well, I think let's let Lindsay answer.
Yeah. Or what comes up for Lindsay?
Oh, well, I was just thinking how you talked about that, we talked about that shame and that fear, and that would maybe, drive you to go back into it, because of like how big that feeling was. But I think when you can now, like, as you've been through that, and I can, even my own self, like, my own things that I struggle with, it's like, when you can come into your truth, there's no greater power. When you are in truth and you're coming through just as your whole self, and you're saying, this is me, and that the people who like that's just the greatest power. So I think the more that you can trust that and just kind of be okay with that, and know that people will think, like, what other people think about you is none of your business, and that if you can be in your own truth, you're going to just, things will flow, and you're going to kind of experience that. So I think that you're such a testament to that, and you saying that there's nothing that you can really do for someone that you love that's addicted, that's going through something, but you just, anybody like yourself, anyone who's showing up as their whole self and in their truth, that is kind of
true.
Inspiring people without even saying a word.
Exactly. You're right about that. I think that's great. And right when you started speaking about that, I thought about it, and you can be an example for those people. And that's what the program and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is about. We share our experience, strength, and hope, that we may freely give that which was freely given to us. Something I must set up a little bit, but that we may give that which was freely given to us.
Yeah. And no matter what someone's facing, that anyone who's around someone, you can just like show them that compassion, right? That they're what they're going through. It's just, all you can do in that moment is just be an energetic presence of just love, right?
Isn't that great? Yeah, you're absolutely right. An energetic presence of love.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so powerful and it's so true.
Right.
I mean, that is absolutely true. So that they can feel it, right?
Right.
Radiating. Yeah.
Right.
Amen. Yeah.
Right. I love that. I so love that. And I also think, like, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm so excited about this ending point that I think that if we can have compassion for ourselves and really know that we're okay and just be a model for other people, that it's okay to be where you're at. It's okay not to be perfect, or whatever perfect means. I don't even know what perfect means. So, yeah.
Yeah.
There's like all these things going on all these fun stuff going on.
Right.
I'm like,
Welcome to the life of Scott.
Yeah. Well, I feel really honored to have sat here.
And I feel the honor too for you guys to have me on here. I was real excited about it.
Yeah.
And I do wish you guys a lot of luck with your channel.
Yeah.
I've noticed that it seems like your numbers are going up really nicely. Like you got 3,000 views or something on your last video. That's amazing.
Well, thank you. But one thing that we do at the end, I always laugh when I say that, reminds me of my kids, is we do a meditation, and Lindsay always, well, first of all, is there anything else you want to say to anybody out there, Scott? If there's, what do you want to leave with today and put out there for whomever before we go?
I think we really covered a lot, and I think we covered the good aspects, and I don't like using the cliches, but yeah, I think you have to it's an honest program, right? And you have to be honest with yourself. And I think the honesty that you're looking for is, how are you going to connect to this power greater than yourself, right? Be it AA or Christianity or none of it. How are you going to connect with this power that surrounds us? This amazing power. And you're not going to do it by being on Facebook, and watching television and, drinking, and, it won't come that way. You have to be still and know, right? That's what they say, be still and know I am God. So you have to find that stillness. But with that being said, there's plenty of testaments that it's possible, and it's not an inclusive ability.
Yeah. I just remembered.
It's not exclusive. It's not exclusive. It's inclusive.
And I just remembered what I was going to say earlier, real quick. I know we're over time, but is that what I feel as we grow up and as we mature, even with the learned helplessness, is that we are getting rid of old belief systems that aren't working for us. And it sounds like you, Scott, are starting to recognize your new belief system. What is your truth? What is your new belief system that's healthy and you're able to move forward? So the more you clear those old belief systems that aren't working for you, I really believe when you step into your new belief systems and you honor those, and it becomes part of who you are. So it's an evolving process.
Yeah. Awesome.
I want to thank you. We're going to do a meditation to close. Are you still okay with that, Lindsay?
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for being on this show. We really appreciate it, and we're very, very, very excited. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some music on. Hopefully it will work here.
All right. Okay, so thank you for being here, and I just want everyone to end on a nice calming note. We're so grateful to Scott for sharing everything that he shared today, and let's just all take a moment now to just take a deep breath. Maybe roll your shoulders back if that feels good to you. Roll your neck. However, you can just create that stillness within your body. You know that as we can be still in our body, that we can kind of create some space and feel who we are. We want to feel what we're feeling in our heart. in our center, because we know that that's where love is. That's where we can connect, and as we breathe in, we can just feel that energy that flows through our body. At any time, we can return to this stillness, return to that love that's within us. Know that that invisible room of energy that's within us is within others too, and that's how we connect. Just remember that being in our truth, being in your truth, is the best way for you to show up in this world. And you can feel it as you just tune in and connect and trust that there's an energy within you that's connecting to those around you, and that's truth and love. At any time I can pause, breathe, and just return to that stillness within you, and know that wherever you are right now, whatever may have happened before now, that you are worthy, you are loved, you are enough, and you are wanted. Begin to feel that peace and that energy, and just as you open your eyes and just go back into your day, and know that spiritual connection is always there and guiding you along. Thank you so much, Scott. It was so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, ladies. You have a great night. Thanks for having me on, okay?
I just want to tell you one last thing. A message came in for you when Lindsay said this. I want to let you know you are wanted.
Oh, you said that. Oh, the message came in through your channel. That's so nice.
So you are.
I will keep that
along here. So thank you all.
Thank you, ladies.
Take
Have
care.
a good night.
Good night. Thank you.